Roy, this is going to be a great day.
We hope you enjoy the video.
Ready? From Blackbutt Lines. Have a great day. Here it is.
I'd now like to call on Mr. Allan Pidgeon AM, President of the Australian National Flag Association, to address us. Thank you, Allan.
Thank you very much. I'll try and talk loudly and let me know if you can't hear. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honour and a pleasure to be here today on this very special occasion at this very special place. And it's particularly appropriate to be unveiling this flagpole on Australia Day and to fly the Australian flag and also to fly it here at the Roy Emerson Museum at Blackbutt. So I feel very privileged to be able to speak at the first time that the flag's been flown here. And can I echo the thanks that were expressed to all those who've arranged for the flagpole to be installed, for the Masonic Lodge, for the local businesses, for the Heritage Committee, to all the others who've actually been involved in the museum, in putting this together. It's a great asset for your community, and it's tremendous to acknowledge not only the history of the region, but also a very significant Australian, Roy Emerson. And I want to talk a little bit about celebrating today, because it is Australia Day, and we celebrate on Australia Day not that Australia is a perfect nation, there's no such thing on earth, but we celebrate the fact that we have built here a society that we can be proud of. And obviously, as I say, there are parts of our history that are regrettable and that are perhaps tragic even, but we are not in a position to reverse our history. We're here to say, as Australians today, we're doing all we can to make this a better place for everyone. And so when we think about Australia Day, we also should acknowledge that January 26 has a significance all of its own, because in 1949, that's the day we all became Australian citizens. Until the Citizenship Act had been passed, we were British subjects. On January 26, 1949, everyone in Australia became a Australian citizen, and that included Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. All Australians became Australian citizens as that status on 26th of January. So we celebrate an anniversary there that's significant for all Australians as well. And the fact that the first fleet came and landed on January 26 in 1788, or raised the flag on January 26, the thing that they did bring from the UK was not only our national language, English, our parliamentary system of government, I acknowledge Deb Freckleton here, but also the rule of law, which said over centuries has established that no one was higher than the law. And that was demonstrated by the fact that the very first civil case in Australia convened after 1788 was a convict who sued the captain of the ship that transported him over because some of his possessions were lost. And he got an award of damages for the captain having not looked after his possessions on the trip over. Now, if the first fleet had not been British, if it had been Dutch or French or Spanish, I don't think you would have seen that happen, that it was established that all were equal under the law and no one was above the law. So let's celebrate on Australia Day that we have a country we can be proud of. And when we think of Australia, we think of our national symbol. We've just flown the Australian flag. I'm president of the Australian National Flag Association, and we try to tell people the story of their flag. Because even though opinion polls show that our flag is more popular than it's ever been, very few of us know its history. After Federation in 1901, obviously the new Commonwealth needed a flag. And in other countries, what would happen is politicians would go into a little room, they'd decide and then come out and say, here's your flag, enjoy it everyone. But in Australia we do it differently. We had the world's first ever flag design competition. We let every Aussie have a go in designing our national symbol. And in 1901 there were entries in that competition from nearly 1% of Australians who were around at that time. That was nearly 38,000 entries. And they covered all sorts of weird and wonderful designs. There was one book that said they covered every aspect of Australian flora and fauna, sometimes all at once. What could have been our flag, some of the designs that didn't win, one was native animals playing cricket with a winged cricket ball. There was a kangaroo with 6 tails, 1 tail for each of the Australian states. The one that really intrigues me is described as a flag that had a kangaroo firing a shotgun through the stars of the Southern Cross. I'm pleased they didn't choose that design. But the design that was chosen was actually submitted by 5 people. So there were 5, we call them Forgotten 5, the people who designed Australia's flag and won the first ever flag design competition in the world. And they were, if anybody's heard this story, the one name they may have heard is Ivor Evans, who was a 14-year-old schoolboy from Melbourne. He was one of the winners. There was an artist from Perth, Annie Dorrington. There was a ship's captain who actually was across the ditch in New Zealand. There was an apprentice optometrist, and there was another teenager. So in fact, the entries were anonymous, so there was no favouritism. And it was interesting that there were young people and women who were shared in the honour of designing our flag. And they also shared in the prize money, which may have been an incentive for so many entries, because the prize money was £200, which in 1901 was a very significant sum. One book I've read said it was the equivalent to an annual wage for an average working man. So even split 5 ways, each of the winners of the flag design competition received a significant sum. And so the design they unveiled on September 3, 1901, when the competition winner was announced, is the flag we enjoy today. There are only a few minor points of difference which you wouldn't actually notice unless you look very closely. Firstly, the stars of the Southern Cross in the original flag were different points to try and represent the way that the Southern Cross appears in the sky. The flag manufacturers said that made it too complicated, and so they were standardised so that the 4 main stars have 7 points and the smaller pointer star has 5 points. And originally the Commonwealth Star or the Federation Star had 6 points, 1 for each Australian state. They added a 7th point to cover Australia's territories, not only the Northern Territory and the ACT, but also external territories such as Australia's Antarctic Territory, Cocos Island, etc. So they are very minor variations, but the essential flag is as it was since it was first flown on September 3, 1901. And the significance of this design is that it tells Australia's story, the past, the present and the future, because the past is the Southern Cross, which is the only visible in the Southern Hemisphere. It shows our place in the world. Significantly, the Southern Cross is also very important in Aboriginal mythology. There are a lot of Aboriginal myths and legends that relate to the Southern Cross. At that time, we had the Union Jack, which, as I said, symbolised that European settlement came from Great Britain. At that stage, it could have come from any other colonial power, France, Spain, whatever, but it happened to be the British who were the first Europeans here. And as a result, as I said, we have our national language, English, we have the parliamentary system of government, and we have the rule of law. And then the future is the Commonwealth Star, the Federation Star, symbolising all Australians together building a future for our country. So the design, we think, is something that should endure as a symbol of our nation. It's a unique history. The first flag designed ever by a public competition, and the only national flag that flies over an entire continent. So finally, obviously we're here today at Blackbutt with the Nuku School, where one individual in particular that we celebrate today, Roy Emerson, went to school. And Peter Racy, who has done a lot here with the museum, got on to Roy Emerson and asked him what the flag means to him. And Roy asked us to read this message: "What the flag means to me. When seeing the Australian flag flying, I immediately have thoughts of my love for and my pride in Australia. Not only is it our heritage and national identity, but our wonderful way of life with Australians enjoy, living in a free, peaceful society with boundless opportunities. The Australian flag reminds us how fortunate we are to be Australians." So that, from such a star in the sporting world, probably one of the people who put Australia on the world map in tennis and was part of the golden age of Australian tennis. a magnificent sportsman, a great Australian. It's very fitting that you honour him. It's very fitting that you have the museum. It's wonderful that you now fly the Australian flag in front of the museum. And it's very nice that Roy was able to give us those words about what the flag means to him. So happy Australia Day, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. Congratulations for the efforts to not only install the museum but have the flagpole, and we hope you keep the Australian flag flying for a long time to come yet. Thank you so much.